Madeline Turner had never been a morning person, but her alarm clock had never felt like a tyrant until the watch arrived. It was sleek, futuristic, gleaming on her wrist like a miniature tablet. Her boyfriend, Colin, insisted it was for her benefit, a smart sleep and heart rate monitor designed to optimize every moment of rest. "It's just a gift," he said, a smile so practiced it felt like it belonged to someone else. "I know you've been stressed with travel and deadlines. This will help you get your sleep back on track." At first, Madeline was flattered. She had struggled with occasional insomnia during late flights or tight project deadlines, and this seemed like a thoughtful solution. Colin, she reminded herself, was meticulous. He had always prided himself on efficiency and optimizing life. A small part of her felt comforted that he cared. But the gift quickly became a chain. Within days, the watch's tiny buzzes and pings dictated her life. "Your heart rate is elevated," it warned at 2:14 a.m., "you need to rest." Colin's voice followed almost immediately. "Madeline, you're awake again? Let me help you." She tried to laugh it off. "It's just the watch," she said. But every night, the alerts punctuated her sleep with anxiety. Her dreams were interrupted by a phantom buzz, her muscles tensed before she even opened her eyes. When she started hitting snooze too many times, Colin leaned over her shoulder during video calls. "You need to sleep better," he said. "Your data is trending poorly. If you don't fix it, your health is at risk." Gradually, Madeline realized he wasn't just concerned about her health. He monitored the app himself, waking her up to correct her sleep position or telling her to go to bed earlier than she wanted. Weekend mornings, she woke not to birds or sunlight but to the gentle scolding from a man who claimed he knew better. Work became exhausting. Flights were a nightmare. Every red-eye left her more fatigued, and Colin insisted she wear the watch even while traveling. Her friends noticed a change. She was anxious at lunch meetings, jittery on calls, snapping over small mistakes. One Thursday morning, after another restless night, she had a panic attack on the subway. Heart racing, sweat soaking her shirt, she clutched her bag and felt her chest tighten. The alerts on her wrist beeped insistently. Colin called immediately. "You're overreacting," he said, his tone tight, "but maybe therapy would help, if you let me come with you." Something inside her shifted. The watch had started as a gift, but it had become a tool of control. Every alert, every buzz, every whispered suggestion had trained her to doubt herself. She was exhausted, anxious, and scared, living under the tyranny of a device he wielded like a leash. She started researching. Sleep specialists, wearable tech studies, articles on hypervigilance caused by constant monitoring. Everything pointed to the same conclusion: devices like hers could exacerbate insomnia, anxiety, and panic. The sleep optimization app wasn't helping, it was harming. Late one night, while Colin slept beside her in the apartment he had subtly moved into her life with, Madeline quietly removed the watch from her wrist. She set it in the drawer, unplugged notifications from her phone, and breathed deeply, allowing silence to fill the room for the first time in months. The next morning, Colin noticed immediately. "Where's your watch? Did you just ignore the data?" His voice was sharp, panicked, almost threatening. Madeline, standing taller than she had in weeks, said, "Yes. I ignored it. I'm going to a specialist, alone." She documented his reaction, took screenshots of messages, and made notes of every instance of control, of every late-night correction, every suggestion that therapy required his presence. A week later, she consulted a sleep specialist. Dr. Rains listened carefully, reviewing the patterns Madeline had endured. "This device isn't helping you," he said. "It's reinforcing hypervigilance and anxiety. Your body is constantly in alert mode. The data isn't useful here, it's making you sicker." For the first time in months, Madeline felt validated. It wasn't her fault. She had not failed. The fatigue and panic attacks were a symptom of control disguised as care. Within the next month, she moved out. She packed her essentials while Colin was away on business trips, reached out to colleagues for support, and found an apartment nearby. She replaced late-night anxiety with long walks, meditation, and check-ins with her sleep specialist. Each morning, she woke without a wrist buzzing, without someone over her shoulder, and she breathed. She told friends and coworkers what had happened. They rallied around her, offering meals, shared apartments, and encouragement. The documentation she kept of Colin's controlling behavior gave her confidence that if legal action or further confrontation was necessary, she could protect herself. Months later, Madeline reflected on what had happened. The watch had been the beginning, but it was never really about sleep. It was control, hidden in the guise of care. She had reclaimed her autonomy, her health, and her life. For the first time in years, she slept through the night. No pings, no alerts, no one telling her how to rest. And when she woke, she smiled, knowing that freedom, once seized, was hers to keep. After a few months in her new apartment, Madeline began to notice subtle changes in herself that she hadn't realized were possible. Her anxiety, once a constant hum in the background of her life, had begun to fade. She could focus at work again without the dread of someone monitoring her every move. Meetings felt manageable. Flights were tolerable. Even her social life improved, she laughed more easily with friends, her energy returning like sunlight after a long winter. But the mental scars of her experience lingered. Every time her phone buzzed, every time she saw a smartwatch in a store window, her chest tightened for a fraction of a second. She knew that recovery wouldn't happen overnight, and she committed herself to rebuilding boundaries, trusting her instincts, and reclaiming her life fully. She also started journaling about the experience, not only as a personal outlet but as a resource for others who might be trapped in similar patterns of control, disguised as care. Her writings were raw, detailed, and reflective. She shared them anonymously on a professional women's forum, where they resonated immediately. Messages poured in as stories of controlling partners, manipulative spouses, and abusive work environments. Encouraged by the response, Madeline began volunteering with a local advocacy group focused on digital abuse and coercive control. She spoke at workshops, describing her experience with wearable technology used as a tool of control. Audiences were captivated, not only by the extremity of her situation but by her resilience and methodical approach to reclaiming her autonomy. Meanwhile, Colin attempted to contact her multiple times, leaving texts and voicemails filled with guilt-tripping language, attempting to convince her to reconsider or understand his concern. Madeline ignored him, allowing herself the space to heal without interference. She eventually sought legal advice to ensure no further harassment could occur, feeling empowered by the knowledge that boundaries could be enforced both personally and legally. Over time, Madeline also reconnected with her own passions. She returned to weekend hiking trips she had abandoned due to exhaustion, took a painting class, and even started a small side project consulting on wellness technology, ironically, focusing on how devices could empower users rather than control them. She became a mentor to younger colleagues, encouraging them to be cautious about the ways technology intersects with personal boundaries. One evening, after a long hike, she looked down at her wrist, no smartwatch, no alerts, no one monitoring her sleep or her heart rate. She felt a sense of calm that was both new and profoundly familiar. For the first time in years, she understood that true health wasn't about constant monitoring, it was about trust in herself and in her body's natural rhythms. Madeline knew she would carry the lessons of this experience for the rest of her life, but she had transformed the fear and exhaustion into empowerment. Her future was no longer dictated by devices, by controlling partners, or by anxiety, it was her own. And as she slept that night, she finally did so unmonitored, undisturbed, and entirely free. The long nights of panic, the intrusive pings, the constant surveillance, they were behind her. Madeline had reclaimed her life, her agency, and her peace. Madeline woke the next morning in her own rhythm, sunlight spilling across her bedroom. There was no ping, no vibration, no voice reminding her she was not resting properly. She stretched, feeling the tension in her shoulders loosen for the first time in months. She smiled, not out of relief alone, but out of pride. She had survived manipulation disguised as care. She had reclaimed her life, her mind, and her body. The freedom she felt wasn't just about removing a device from her wrist, it was about reclaiming her agency, trusting herself, and setting boundaries that no one could violate. Over the following weeks, she fully settled into her new apartment, decorating it with plants and books that had been neglected, carving out a sanctuary where she could think, create, and rest. She began sleeping normally again, waking naturally with the sun, and finding joy in simple routines she hadn't felt in months, brewing coffee, reading on her balcony, and taking long walks without checking her wrist every few minutes. Madeline also reached out to friends and colleagues who had supported her, sharing her story to warn others about the dangers of invasive monitoring under the guise of care. Her courage inspired others to speak up, to take control of their own lives, and to reclaim their personal space and privacy. As she closed her eyes that night, the room silent, the city humming gently outside, she realized that the true measure of health wasn't tracked in apps or pings, it was the peace of mind that comes from living on your own terms. Madeline had taken back her life. She was free. And this time, the freedom was permanent.